Heaven! Hello, I'm LowCloud8 and I'm on a journey to beat every PlayStation 2 RPG. According to my research, that includes 160 titles. In order to officially beat a game on this list, I must defeat whatever the title claims is the final boss and see the game's credits. I am not required to complete the post-game content nor any other optional content in the game, though doing so does play into my rating system. Speaking of, after completing a game, I'll be rating the titles using my own developed metrics. I'll be rating a title by 5 categories. These are graphics, sound and music, battle and mechanics, story, and the X Factor. Each category receives a score from 0 to 2, which combines into a rating between 0 and 10. Games that receive a 3 or lower are considered bad games. A 4 or 5 are mediocre titles, a 6 or 7 is a good game, an 8 is a great game, and a 9 or above is a must-play title. You can see the rating for every title I've completed as well as a deeper explanation of my rating system by clicking on the link in the description of this video. After every 10 titles completed, I'll be compiling them into a single video where I'll summarize the pros and cons of the title. If a game received a score of 6 or higher, I'll talk about its cons first, then end with its pros. If it's lower than a 6, I'll do the opposite. Today's video is covering games 1 through 10 of my playthroughs. Before we get started, if you would like to follow me along this journey, be sure to subscribe to this and my gameplay channel, LowCloud8 Gameplay. There you can watch all of my entire playthroughs from beginning to end. Also, consider becoming a Patreon member and supporting me on this journey. Now with all of that out of the way, I present to you the first 10 games of this challenge. I did not plan on this being the case, but Grandia 3 ended up being the perfect game to start with. It scored just over a 5 on my scale. I consider a 6 or higher to be a good game. Grandia 3 ended up landing nearly smack dab in the middle of the ratings, making it the title to beat in order to be considered a good game. The third title in this beloved series looks fantastic. Character models, expressions, world, and animation all hold up to this day. In fact, considering how awkward and janky PS2 character models can be, Grandia 3 had the best of any title I've beaten so far for this challenge. The story is compelling. That is at first. You follow a boy named Yuki and his mother Miranda as they escort a priestess named Alfina back to her people. The dynamic between Yuki and his mother is entirely unique to the RPG genre and brought a new spin to the storytelling. You even get to watch as Miranda falls for a Han Solo-esque ruffian, their romance being the pinnacle of this title's story. Now, no one can talk about Grandia 3's pros without bringing up its battle system. The Grandia formula is a great take on turn-based combat. It revolves heavily around turn order, with an emphasis on advancing your turn while delaying the enemies. Once it's your turn, you must consider the distance between you and your enemy, as well as your attack's range. The entire thing was immensely addicting, and messing around with the sparse character customization was well worth it for the effects it had in battle. Unfortunately, Grandia 3 has one very major flaw. That is that about 10 hours into your playthrough, around the time that Miranda leaves the party, the quality of this title takes a massive nosedive. Story-wise, Grandia 3 becomes a typical boy meets girl and sets off to save the world narrative. All story characters introduced at this point were dull and unimaginative, and Grandia 3's presented theme of flight had little to do with the narrative at all. As the game continues, the plot becomes less and less thought out, until the only thing driving it forward is a series of Deus Ex Machina. The superb battle system also suffers here as it stops evolving past the 10-hour point as well. Character customization is limited, and even if I wanted to participate in it, this title lacked any and all side content. It's unfortunate because the potential was there. I enjoyed my first 10 hours of play, and struggled through the next 20 hours, which ultimately left Grandia 3 as an okay title, worthy of its 5.5 score. The second game of this challenge was Stella Deus: The Gate of Eternity, a challenging tactical role-playing game that has been on my radar for years. If I were to describe this game's faults, I'd say that it's dry. Many of the game's mechanics lack flair, and thus the game can actually come off as kinda boring. An example would be its quest mechanic. Quests are accepted in the main hub, and you are given vague descriptions of where to go and who to fight. Strange enough, sometimes there are quests given out that are way beyond your level and ability, but the only way to find out is going to the quest location and getting your ass kicked. Another example of the dryness of this title would be the plot of Chapter 4. I wouldn't say that Stella Deus is a story-heavy game, but it does have a sprawling, decently spaced plot with intriguing characters. That is until you get to Chapter 4, which is the longest of the 5 chapters. This section of the game has you running around to 4 different elemental spirits. After defeating them, they will, using the exact same dialogue, present you with their elemental spirit, thus progressing the narrative. This entire section of the game was derivative, repetitive, and boring. My final major gripe of this title was recruiting special members for your party. There are a handful of characters you can receive, but getting them requires you to follow a guide. Other than Tia, a casual player will have no idea how to recruit these characters. The requirements are so specific, and it's incredibly easy to make a mistake and lock yourself out of recruiting them. Now, all of that may sound bad, but overall, Stella Deus was an enjoyable experience. First of all, the sprite work is absolutely superb. Many tactical RPGs during the PS2 era opted for chibi-like sprites, but Stella Deus' sprites are mature looking with incredibly fluent movements. The art style alone deserves a shout out. It's not easy to make a monochrome palette of grays interesting, but series artist Shigenori Soejima did a fantastic job here. The battles are truly where this game shines. Mechanics such as the AP system where every action taken depletes the character's AP, or the combo attacks pushed me to constantly consider my tactics. And that's a good thing as this title was challenging, but not so challenging that it wasn't fun. Other than Chapter 4, I was constantly engaged. The final few battles push a player to use everything they've learned throughout their playthrough. Because of this, Stella Deus received a score of 6, making it the first good game I completed for this challenge. Game number 3 was Puzzle Quest, and oh boy. As far as pros go, Puzzle Quest is a fun puzzle game. The mechanics are intricate enough that individual matches are interesting. I also enjoyed how much promised customizability there is at the beginning with picking a class and gaining skills. Unfortunately, every mechanic in this title is only skin deep. As a puzzle game, Puzzle Quest is fun. As an RPG, it is an absolute grind. The game is broken up into 2 styles, world map traversal and puzzle matches. The world map is tiresome. Throughout the story, you have to move all around this map, and barring a glitch I happened upon, if you run into an enemy, you are locked into a 10 to 15 minute match. And I hope you like puzzles, because you will be playing this well-built but unevolving puzzle game hundreds of times before your playthrough is over. Not only did the puzzle gameplay not change much through the playthrough, but all mechanics introduced, such as new skills, equipment, or mounts, didn't really move the needle. The changes are minimal at best. From my first match to my last match, I felt like I was playing the exact same game over and over and over again. If this were a mobile game you played while on the train to work, this wouldn't be too bad. Played as a regular RPG, one which I set out to beat, this game was incredibly tiresome and rarely fun, making this my first official bad game. Game number 4 was one of the first games to legitimately surprise me. Shadow Hearts has not aged well graphically. This was an early title on the system, and it's obvious that development started with the PS1 graphical fidelity in mind. Character models look terrible, and the CGI cutscenes are horrifying. The story is good, but in order to get the full experience, you would have to have beaten the niche PS1 RPG title Koudelka, which is a prequel to this title. The battle system is entertaining and was somewhat groundbreaking when it came out. Time has shown its faults though, and overall it is a little simplistic. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about why this received my highest score so far. Shadow Hearts is a horror RPG, which is a super rare subgenre, even to this day. The moody atmosphere and grime and gore go a long way to creating a unique role-playing experience that I will never forget. The Judgment Ring is a great addition to battles. The mechanic determines outcomes most titles leave up to RNG, such as missing an enemy or critting. It's used effectively in story situations as well. The cast, though less colorful than its sequel, are great and each benefits from amazing writing. Like I mentioned, the story is divorced but not fully independent from the storyline of Koudelka. If you've played and beaten Koudelka, you are in for a treat with this title. Despite its obvious age and some outdated mechanical choices, Shadow Hearts is a great PS2 RPG. Game number 5 was Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. This title, in essence, is a watered-down isometric dungeon crawler inspired by the likes of Diablo, Fallout, and its own parent series, Baldur's Gate. The greatest strength of this game is its couch co-op capabilities and the breadth of cheeses and cheats available to the player. My son and I beat this one together, and overall, we enjoyed ourselves. What Baldur's Gate lacks is dungeon variety, interesting boss fights, non-repetitive game mechanics, and useful loot. On top of this, the final boss has an absolutely insane difficulty spike that really makes your whole playthrough irrelevant. My son and I grinded level after level, and the only way we beat her was via the game's invincibility cheat. If there were more classes available at the beginning, leveling produced more valuable skills, and the equipment drops were more useful, this game would have achieved a higher score. Hopefully its sequel is better. Game 6 was Shadow Hearts Covenant, which to this point was the best game I had completed. This title built perfectly upon its predecessor, taking the Judgment Ring mechanic and evolving it into a much more robust and complex system worthy of a 40-hour playthrough. The graphics had also improved dramatically over the previous game. I really have few complaints, the biggest of which are the slower pace and story of Disc 1, the awkward placement of endgame content, and obscure side quest requirements. Aside from that, this is a near-perfect turn-based RPG. One of Shadow Hearts Covenant's greatest strengths is just how well it fits its narrative into the story told in the original Shadow Hearts. The story of Yuri and Alice continues in beautiful consistency. The ending alone is so incredibly satisfying that I can't imagine any changes could improve it. The battle mechanics, as I said earlier, have been improved and has the fast-paced snappiness of the original while adding in dozens of new mechanics like unique skills for each party member, crests, ring customization, and the best new addition, attack combos. Overall, if you're planning on playing some titles from this list, Shadow Hearts Covenant is a must-play. Game number 7 was one of my most controversial reviews in the challenge so far, and that is Radiata Stories. This is obviously a beloved title, and a lot of people look back on it fondly. That being said, Radiata Stories has some major flaws that don't stop this title from being an enjoyable experience, but flaws nonetheless. One of the major issues I have with this title is just how much of it is underdeveloped. For example, there is a relationship mechanic hidden to the player that determines which female party member will join Jack for a small cutscene. The player wouldn't even realize there was a relationship being built here, and the payoff is so small that if you got rid of the mechanic altogether, nothing fundamentally would change about this title. Another example is the battle system. Radiata Stories has a semi-action-oriented battle system that is just basic. There isn't much on these bones. Because of this, it's not very engaging and becomes a bit of a grind later on in the story. Now, the underdevelopment is an issue, but some of the ideas present in this title are awesome and deserve praise. Being able to recruit nearly every single NPC in the game to join you in battle is mind-boggling. There's even a decent attempt to develop each character, at least slightly. Not only that, but the story branching into its final arc, giving the player a narrative-splitting choice, is interesting. I don't think it lands and causes more issues than it solves, but it's still cool to see developers trying out unique ideas. Overall, Radiata Stories is an ambitious title that is pretty much half-baked. It's still a fun game to play, and I did enjoy my playthrough, but overall I couldn't really ignore its problems. Game number 8 was Shining Tears. This sequel to the beloved Genesis series would have dropped by an entire point had it not had a co-op feature. The AI of your party members is so useless that playing single player is tantamount to playing on a higher difficulty. Aside from the couch co-op feature, the only other positives I can say here is the character artwork and hand-painted backgrounds. Everything else ranges from mediocre to terrible. The battle system is simplistic and button-mashy. The enemy AI is about as terrible as the party members, and the story is forgettable at best. I also have to mention that the final dungeon is a punishing 3 hours long, with some of the most ridiculous enemy mobs I have ever encountered in a Muso-type game like this. This is a pretty terrible game, and I don't recommend anyone play it. The 9th title in this challenge was my first Shin Megami title, one of many on the PS2, Digital Devil Saga. I didn't have too many complaints with this game. The SMT turn-based battles have always been the deepest in the genre, and this title is no different. Pretty much the opposite of Radiata Stories, my complaints are a bunch of small things. The environments are boring and repetitive. The story is sparse and is hampered by a silent hero. The difficulty spikes can be annoying and unfair at times, and certain mechanics in the battle system can just be ignored. What I loved about this title is the battle system. It's an exhilarating, fast-paced, and intricate system that requires the player to be attentive. There's no button mashing here. Some of the hardest battles I participate in were common encounters. Everything is contingent on exploiting weaknesses, and building your party with a wide breadth of elemental and element skills was an absolute blast. I also have to say that the demon designs are on point here. I love how each is given some distinctive identifying feature, whether that's mouths for breaths or forearm blades. I had fun with this title, and I'm optimistic that the sequel will fix some of these smaller issues. Game number 10 was my first roguelike RPG in the challenge, Nightmare of Duraga. If you're looking for a boring experience, full of repetitive dungeon crawling, where you are rewarded with useless loot and a hefty amount of walking and button tapping, then this is the game for you. The agility system, hidden gold and silver chests, and a reverence for its arcade counterpart is about the only positives here. At least it's not Puzzle Quest. It's amazing that this 20-hour game has felt like the longest playthrough I've completed so far. Playing this title made me wary of other roguelikes I'm gonna have to beat in the future. It's almost like the developers didn't understand why someone would want to play a game like this. In conclusion, Nightmare of Duraga is a game I don't recommend anyone play. And there you have it, a review for the first 10 games I completed in this challenge. If you would like to see more details on these titles, check out my in-depth reviews on my main channel. Also, if you want to watch my playthroughs, you can find them on my second channel, Low Cloud and Gameplay. Thank you to all my Patreon members, and if you would like to support me through this challenge, click on the link below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.